we brought in Lynn, right, to kind of help work with us, and she brought that framework, the DiSC profile, and maybe just briefly explain that, because you're kind of like semi-expert on that topic now, and I've heard you explain it before, and I've actually started using that with my team, and in fact, I hired Lynn Waldera. For the listeners here, she was an advisor to us and an amazing partner, helping us improve our communication and work together. But are you using a similar framework now that you're running a new company? I want to double down on more about Nomad and a little later in the session, but maybe talk a little bit more about kind of what that dynamic was and how you've incorporated that framework into building cohesive teams.
Sure. So I'm not sure I'm an expert. I would say I'm more of an enthusiast, which is halfway, I would say. So so basically what that tool, it helps us.
Lucas, maybe we set the stage real quick on the fact that when we did this and we got the results back of everybody was a D except for Thomas and I.
Yeah, or a D borderline. But yeah.
Maybe explain like the framework and then give that context.
Sure. So the exercise, it's kind of a simplification of the world in terms of putting people into 4 different types of profiles. Of course, it's much more complex than that. And also bear in mind that this is definitely not the theory. So there are definitely holes here in this explanation. But the point is, you try to understand how people are classified in two different dimensions. One is being either more rational or more emotional, and the other dimension is being intense, active, energetic, or being more calm, reserved, more of a listener, right? So you get those dimensions and you plot in a X and Y chart. And of course, there is no just 4 positions. Imagine a circle around that X and Y chart, and then you can have people sitting all around that circle. If you are more rational and you are more intense, you're classified as more decisive, more assertive, which is the classification of the D is dominant. If you are intense, but instead of being rational, you're more emotional, you're an influencer. You're more of a cheerleader, right? Yes, you're optimistic. If you are emotional but not intense, you're more calm, reserved, then the profile is more stability. That's the S. So you're more of a listener, you're more of a consultant, you're humble. But if you are calm, not very energetic, more reserved, but not emotional, but rational, then you are the C, which is consciousness, and it's more of kind of the definition of the introspect, more intelligent, more analytical. Those are kind of the 4 profiles. But of course, you could be sitting anywhere in that circle. So you could be either a very intense D or not so intense D, or maybe in between D and I, which means, okay, you're extremely energetic, but in between emotional and rational, etc. So that's basically the frame, right? And so you go through a very structured questionnaire, and that's what you said. In the end, when we got our team, you were kind of an I, which is the influence.
I think I was an ID, like but more a little more on the I side.
Yeah, but borderline, really a little bit of I, a little bit of D, an influencer and dominant, right? So really cheerleader, optimistic, but driving execution, focused on being assertive, etc. Thomas, who was the head of product, he was more of a C, which is the analytical guy, not very intense, more reserved, that type of personality. And then all of us, the other ones, were all these: dominants, executors, don't like structure, don't like bullshit, let's do it, intense, etc. But all of those profiles have pros and cons, right? So in our case, the con of being a D was that being defensive and not vulnerable, right? Especially in times of stress, in times of a lot of anxiety. The Ds, the dominant profiles, they don't like to be proven they're wrong. They just do whatever it takes to execute and to prove they're right. So as we can imagine, we can have both pros and cons in every profile, and every profile is important, and every profile can perform well, but some can behave and some can have some attitudes in a more natural way, in a more autopilot way. They don't need to put themselves out of their comfort zone to behave in a different profile that the natural profile would expect them to behave. So a little bit complicated, theoretical, but the point is, yes, we use that framework to help us understand ourselves. And I remember the first time that we got those profiles and we read them, it was maybe a 10-page report. And while we were reading, I remember, because the day was quite intense, but I remember reading, I remember going through those pages, and I thought, hey, was this written especially like only for me personally, or is this kind of a theoretical report for the D type of personality? And it was just the D, right? Of course, there were not only 4, I think there were 12 different reports, but we were reading those reports, and really, I thought it was 100% about me only, really customized, but it was not. And so it was a weekend, and over the weekend, we went through different dynamics and exercises, and each time we made a reflection on, okay, and what about this part of your personality? And what about that situation in which you behave this way? How can you connect that to your profile now that you are having an outside perspective of your own personality? And then let's now match the 2 different personalities, you and your peers, right? How do you think that person is expected to react when you do this, right? So it is understandable. So it helps you create a lot of empathy. It helps you understand, it helps you preempt the situations and running away from the destructive conflict, but taking advantage of the productive conflict, which is of course natural and necessary for consensus, for commitment to be built, right? And then execute on the commitment and build the cohesive team. So yes, I think people can tell how enthusiastic I am about the frame. And we not only used it to ourselves as a team, as an executive team, but we replicated that, a version of that framework, to multiple teams in the organization at different times. And it really helped create this work on team building activities and to create this dynamic across multiple teams in the company.